Hey everyone, I'm Timour from Edge City, and I'm really excited to talk to Paul Brody today. So, Paul is the global blockchain leader at EY by day, and by night, he is the chairman of the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance, where he's focused on the sole purpose of getting more people and enterprises into Ethereum and into our ecosystem. So, EY has been an early leader in the enterprise side of this space. And Paul, you've actually developed two products. Nightfall and Starlight, both open sourced. And so maybe to start, you could actually just give us an overview of what they are and importantly, why you decided to build them in the open.
Yeah, fantastic question. So at EY, one of the early things that we got into the blockchain business. I got into the blockchain business actually about 13 years ago when I worked at IBM, and I started to figure out decentralized computing, distributed computing, and I went down this blockchain path for a while. We started on Bitcoin, and one of my colleagues said, I met this guy. He wants to do like Bitcoin, but programmable. And I was like, that, I want to do that. And so I worked on a little bit. IBM's first blockchain at the time was called Adept, which was built on an alpha version of Ethereum. And it was truly for me kind of a bit of a life-changing experience, all the cool things you can do with it. And I wanted to really make that the focus of my career. IBM did not. So IBM and I parted ways, and I ended up at a dynamic technology company, Ernst & Young, a big global accounting firm. And believe it or not, though, they wanted to fund and invest in blockchain. And we started thinking through kind of where should we go and what should we do. And we came to a fairly quick realization of two really important things. Number one, private blockchains are stupid, right? There is fundamentally no point in a centrally managed decentralized ledger. Like the hint is in the name, right? This did not stop, I should say, this did not stop companies spending literally billions of dollars over the last 10 years trying to somehow make this impossible idea work. The second issue, though, is that enterprises must have privacy. So I used to go around saying, and I was completely wrong, I used to go around saying that Ethereum would never have a scaling problem until it fixed its privacy problem. I was completely wrong about that. Apparently, people have actually quite a high tolerance for low privacy, especially when it comes to kind of fungible tokens. There's some stuff that you can do, but for business users, it's important. And if you think about a business agreement, every business agreement is actually really, really simple. It's easy to describe. I have money, you have stuff, right? And we're going to exchange my money for your stuff under the terms of some kind of an agreement. And both of those things are very important. The money, the stuff, right? How much I'm getting, who's paying for it is really important. But also the terms of the agreement. Like if you can see the terms of my agreement, you don't even really need to know what I'm buying or how much I'm paying because it's already specified in the agreement. So our hypothesis was we need to fix this. We need to make this work, and we need everybody in the industry to adopt it. And the way you get people to adopt stuff is you make it free and open source. So that is what we did. We built two products. One about the money and stuff. It's called Nightfall. It is a zero-knowledge layer 2 network for Ethereum, where the zero knowledge is for privacy, not just scalability. It's actually, we call it the ZK rollup because we have one layer of zero knowledge for scalability and one layer of zero knowledge for privacy. And that covers like the money for stuff part. You can put tokens into it. It'll move them around. You can give them to other people. Secondly, we created something called Starlight. And what Starlight does is it allows you to take a Solidity smart contract, one of these like basically sort of business rules automation tools, and turn it into a zero knowledge circuit. And I mean, I thought I was good at math. I don't have the faintest idea. I barely understand how zero knowledge works in the first place. The idea that you can actually turn it into like a programmable circuit still blows my mind, but you can. It runs as a black box on chain. And so now between Nightfall and Starlight, you have all the tools you need to build complex business agreements and run them on a public blockchain with privacy.
That's awesome. I'm curious about the experience of, like, you don't often hear about private enterprises or especially, big four firms doing kind of public goods like this or building in the open. What was the experience of like doing that internally? How was it received? How did you, convince the powers that be that this is the right thing to do, etc.?
So a little bit of indoctrination and a little bit of luck and a little bit of stubbornness kind of all came together. I personally am very much a starry-eyed optimist. Like the last big white paper I wrote when I was at IBM was called Device Democracy, and it was just about this idea that distributed computing would actually kind of restore the fundamentally decentralized nature of the internet, and that would kind of bring us back to a somewhat more democratic kind of model of our machine interactions. This was 12 years ago. I've always harbored that sort of level of idealism. Convincing others to go along with it turned out to be quite a challenge. There was a little bit of good luck, which is that a big firm like EY, they have almost no history of building software, like really none whatsoever. So unlike a place like IBM, where you have very strong opinions about how licenses should be used and what kind of licenses should be done and all of this stuff, I got a bit of a clean slate. And in doing that, although there was a lot of skepticism, I was able to do something that to this day I'm very, very proud of. The stuff that we did at EY for Nightfall and Starlight, it's not just open source, it's public domain. And to me, that is a really big deal, because I think one of the most pernicious trends in open source has been these like specially written licenses that contain little landmines in them, right? That make it difficult for you to actually build a commercial product or an asset on top of it. And so, I not only did I eventually succeed in convincing my colleagues that we should go open source, I convinced them to kind of go all the way. We got to third base on the first date, and we then went sort of full open source and public domain on the grounds that if there was no license agreement, other companies would not need to call in their lawyers. They would not have to review the license agreement that gave it to them for free, and we would be removing a significant piece of friction from the process of adopting the technology. By the way, I was completely wrong about that too.
Do you think some of the enterprises that you work with, or enterprises in general, care about the ideals of, in the public goods or Ethereum space? Like, do they care about decentralization? Is it something that they're thinking about? Or, I mean, like you told me earlier, there are still people building private blockchains, which kind of just boggles my mind. Like, what's up with that?
So there's this joke about a phrase attributed to Churchill. He didn't actually say it, but he said, America can always be counted on to do the right thing, but only after exhausting all the other options. We're sort of living that time at the moment, I hope. But one of the other factors in here is like large companies in some ways can be counted on to embrace public domain once they've given up the idea that they themselves can be the monopolist. Right? The starting point for all large businesses, and I used to hear this phrase a lot when I was at IBM, like, what's our fair share of the market? The correct answer, if you're a large company, is that your fair share of the market is zero. Right? One of the sort of kind of bizarre fantasies that large companies have is that their brand name will somehow entitle them to a share of a new market. This never turns out to be true. But they start in that direction. They move along. They do care when you try to explain it to them. They do start to care about the fact that, like, if I'm not going to be the monopolist, I want to be in an ecosystem where somebody else cannot make me the monopolist. What I always tell them is, like, you don't want to wake up tomorrow morning as a taxi company in a ride-sharing world. Like, that's not a happy ending. That's a very unhappy ending.
Yeah, that makes sense. I find enterprise very interesting because it's, to me, reflective of mainstream adoption in an interesting way that I don't normally think about. I'm very much in like a crypto Twitter, bubble. I'm curious for Ethereum specifically, like, how is it being discussed? I feel like right now things are changing quickly. The last few months, especially, there's a recent discussion on Twitter about like the possibility of Ethereum kind of falling into the Linux trap of being something that's foundationally important, but has no real perception in mainstream culture or consciousness. Do you feel like that's a worry, or are people like, how do people, when people hear the word Ethereum, if they're like a CEO of a big enterprise, what are they thinking?
So I hope Ethereum whatever this like Linux trap is, I kind of hope we fall into it. One of my theories is that actually infrastructure becomes indispensable when it becomes invisible and used by everybody, which is actually a good description of Linux. And by the way, I think, and I talk about this a lot on Twitter because it really bugs me, like the state of discourse on crypto Twitter. Ethereum won. It's game over. I'm sorry if you're from a different blockchain. Ethereum won. And it is, thank you. It's like 58% of DeFi locked value. 85% of real world assets are tokenized on Ethereum. There are something like 50 L2s operating in the ecosystem. So Ethereum is hugely successful. And what I talk to enterprise leaders about is, listen, this is not about what the best technology is. Ethereum is the biggest ecosystem. When you sit down to write a business application, you're like, wow, what's the coolest operating system? No. You write it for Windows or for Mac because those are the operating systems that people have and you want to sell stuff to them. What is particularly good about the Ethereum Foundation is that they behave like stewards of mission-critical business infrastructure. They have delivered every 3 to 6 months for the last few years a significant hard fork without downtime. There is no other blockchain of remotely any size that can match that. And so when I see people like, oh, they should move faster. No, thank you. Enterprise leaders do not want that. We would like reliability and consistency and performance, right? Of a DTCC or a New York Stock Exchange. I want Ethereum going down to be about as frequently as you hear about the New York Stock Exchange not functioning.
Can you talk more about the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance? Like, how is it structured? What do you guys do? What's the mandate and your role as the chairperson?
I am the chief spokesmodel, and the goal, I'm the chairman, and the goal behind the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance is to basically drive adoption inside the business, inside businesses. Right now, Ethereum is, and Ethereum users are very, very focused on financial services. I get that, and enterprise adoption is accelerating because regulatory approval is happening. And that is a very, very good thing. But over time, we need to go past like just the money and the tokenized assets. I think Ethereum becomes this infrastructure that is used by all businesses for B2B agreements. And I want to share with you just one of my favorite stories about how incredibly powerful smart contracts are. And I talk, one of the things I do in my chairman role is I go around and tell people how powerful it is for business users. 5 years ago, Microsoft asked EY to develop a new procurement system for the Xbox video game network. Microsoft buys billions of dollars of video games from thousands of different companies every year that are resold to Xbox video game users. And the contracts are complicated, right? They all have different terms and conditions. You get paid after a certain amount of time. You get paid a differing percentage. It's not like the App Store where you just get 70% for everything. It kind of depends on what you negotiate. And this was proving complicated for Microsoft to keep track of. It took them 45 days after the end of the month to give people their account statements. We took all of those paper contracts and the legacy system and turned them into Ethereum smart contracts running on a permission network. We cut the cycle time from 45 days to 2 minutes, cut the cost in half, and improved the customer satisfaction. And that's just a prototype. What we did 5 years ago on a private chain, we can now do today on public Ethereum. And so I want enterprises to see this not just as a financial tool, not just as a payment system, but as a mechanism for running their business with scale and speed and incredible efficiency.
That's an incredible example and really helps me understand how this will start to get like enterprise penetration. Is it possible to do that now? Are your products live? Like, would you be able to create that like fully private on chain, on mainnet?
Yes. In fact, we just launched a couple of months ago our first ever smart contract product that runs with privacy on the public network, and it's for renewable energy purchasing. Renewable energy purchasing, for those of you who don't know, is super complicated. What happens is you set up an agreement with like a big generator, a multi-year agreement where you're going to buy a certain amount of solar power or wind power at a fixed price. And then there's all these rules in it, like there's a minimum that you'll buy each month and so on. The problem is that actually what you buy, you don't get to the electrons that are in your lights. They aren't necessarily your local organically sourced artisanal electrons. They're whatever is coming from the power system near you. And so there's a monthly reconciliation between you and the power company and the generator. We can take all of that business logic, we turn it into a privately run smart contract that runs on chain and do the same for these as we did for Microsoft, which is better, faster, cheaper.
Yeah, that's awesome. So one thing that enterprises, I imagine, are thinking a lot about right now, like all of us, is AI. And I know the folks in the Ethereum ecosystem and at the foundation are thinking deeply about this as well. I'm curious, from your vantage point, do you see any interesting use cases or possibilities emerging at this intersection of AI, agents, enterprise use cases, and on-chain?
Absolutely. And I'll just give you one example. AI is going to completely reshape supply chains. The way that supply chains work today is there's some very simple rules. You go into a Walmart, you pull the last bag of potato chips off the shelf, and that triggers a reorder. And Walmart has a bunch of rules, or Target or Kmart, or there's no more Kmart anymore. Walmart or Target or whoever you bought it from, they have some rules like, hey, this location, we don't stock more than like one case of potato chips or something like that. The problem is these rules are set at a very crude level by an analyst somewhere using relatively simple kind of algorithms. If you go to a little single store sole proprietor bodega, it doesn't work like that. The shop owner knows, like, he's next door to a school, and when school lets out, the demand for like potato chips at 3 p.m. just disappears, and so he may not reorder very many if it's like the 20th of May and school's almost going to be done for the summer. So he's very smart about it because he can apply a lot of brain power and he knows every single kind of item in his inventory. What if AI can do that at scale in a supermarket or a Target? You have this intelligent system. I don't want to say as smart as you or I, but it doesn't need to be. But it's very focused on, hey, I'm the brain in charge of this section of shelf, right? And I'm going to keep track of all of those things. Then you need to order it. So I see AI, I see blockchain becoming the infrastructure on which we do a lot of transactions, and AI being the brain power that gets applied in enormous ways to all of these millions of small decisions that govern kind of what stuff is, where it is, how likely it is that we're going to find it on the shelf, and so on.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So there's like the chip shelf agent who triggers the smart contract that's like, oh, hey, by the way, we've learned from the last 50 years of data that around this time this might happen, and then there's kind of this cascading set of events. Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, so I think we have a minute. Just to wrap up, I'd like to kind of get a sense of your prediction over the next couple of years. First of all, how many of the Fortune 500, the like S&P 500 are using some kind of on-chain smart contract, do you think, in some capacity right now?
Oh, 1%.
Okay.
Very few.
What do you think will need to happen to get that to like 50% use case?
So I used to have a hypothesis that what would happen is that companies would sort of dip their toe in the water and they would start with something that was not risky, like tracking inventory, and then they would step up to something more complex, like having a whole procurement contract process on board. I was wrong about that. It turns out that actually, because of the immense success of stablecoins, the first thing that's going to happen is companies are going to start buying stuff and sending money using blockchain and crypto payment rails because that's way cheaper. And they're just going to save money by cutting banks out of the transaction processing loop. Then they're going to say, you know what? I'm on chain. All of my business partners are on chain. Let's step up to smart contracts and so on. So I think it's going to be the explosive spread of stable coins and the quick savings on bank fees. And we're seeing that, by the way. SAP, which is the world's biggest ERP system. If you know, who knows what SAP is? That's great. All of you guys have probably had like post-ERP implementation trauma therapy. But SAP has a wallet. There's a crypto wallet in S/4HANA, and EY became the first company to get a crypto payment. That is going to spread like wildfire, and then it's going to trigger this like path forward to smart contracts and business assets and more complex solutions.
Amazing. All right, Paul, thank you so much.
Timour, thank you.